Thanks, Christina. So as she mentioned, I'm a Jira hopper. I used to be a Jira developer, now I'm a Green Hopper developer. But today I'm actually going to talk about Jira and specifically non-software applications of Jira, so how to get it into the rest of your organization. So everyone knows what this is, right? It's the Jira t-shirt. 10 years ago, Mike and Scott knew that software teams are having issues managing all of their issues. So their solution was to build Jira, which could be the bug tracker that you needed without costing a fortune. Now they knew that not all software teams are created equal. And so Jira had to be flexible enough to work for all different kinds of software teams, including Atlassian's own. And what they actually ended up building was a tool that was so flexible, it could be used to power Atlassian's help desk, recruitment, finance, marketing, and all other manner of processes. In a way, Atlassian went from a company with just software issues to having a lot of issues all over the place. So, as administrators, I'm guessing that most of you are familiar with this kind of journey. You probably started out supporting one or two different teams, doing a small number of things, and now you're supporting many teams, doing all sorts of different stuff. Your job is to provide the teams with the tools that they need to do their job. So software teams have it easy. They get the good stuff. But what about other teams? What do they get? Expensive enterprise software that's usually a hangover from a previous age in computing. And that's if they're lucky. Some teams don't even get tools because they don't know what's out there or they can't afford them. These teams need someone to show them the way, to show them that good tools can make all the difference. They need you. And so today I'm going to share with you how you can take your teams on that journey. I'm going to teach you how you can use Jira in the wild to track more than just software issues. So the journey is going to cover a few different parts. We're going to talk about how to convince the organization to use Jira for more than just software stuff. We're going to go through 4 scenarios that range in simplicity to complexity of actual business processes that exist in the world and how we can get them into Jira. We're going to talk about how to make sure you're successful on this journey. And then once you're there, how to keep order, how to make sure that you stay successful. And then hopefully we'll have time for questions. So all the resources and all the materials I'm talking about will be available at this URL after Summit. So if you only take one note, just take this one. And I'll have, and also the video and slides will be up on the Summit website. So let's get started. So you already know that Jira is fantastic. So here's some reasons that you can take with you to convince your colleagues to use Jira across the entire organization. Firstly, you already know and love Jira. You've already got teams using Jira and you know it works because you've seen the successes it can bring. And you've already paid for it, which is a pretty big deal with systems administration. Not just paying for it, but the effort it takes to administer the system and keep it well maintained. There's a fantastic ecosystem around Jira and Atlassian products in general that allows you to customize Jira in many different ways. You've got the marketplace, which allows you to download plugins that can customize every aspect of Jira. You've got Summit, which is a fantastic example of how you guys can get together and talk about ideas about Jira that you probably didn't even know existed. The idea of the one-stop shop. So having Jira as the central place to do work is a really fantastic idea because it means you only need to teach your teams the one system to use. And as administrators, it makes your job easier because you just have to administer one user base. And lastly but not leastly, Jira is a powerful workflow engine. And it can model almost any business process that you can think of. And as soon as you go and tell someone in a position of power that Jira can be used to enforce their authority, they're going to love it. But really, there's just so many ways to do workflows in Jira. And I hope that after today's journey, when you're back at your job, you're going to be thinking about all the different ways that things can be put into Jira projects. You're going to be sitting there analyzing things that happen in your day-to-day life and realizing that this could actually be a project in Jira and it'd be a lot better. You're going to become workflow hunters. So what is a workflow hunter? A workflow hunter identifies common patterns in business processes and they can see them from a mile away. And once they find those business processes, workflow hunters quickly and easily dispatch those processes by implementing them as Jira projects. So as we go through today's journey, keep an eye out for this guy. He's going to highlight the common patterns that we see in our business processes. So let's get started with some scenarios. Scenario 1, we're going to be talking about office administration. So this covers things like facilities management, anything really about your physical working environment. So at Atlassian, we have an office administration process that's handled by our experienced team. And their job is to ensure that Atlassians have a comfortable, safe, and fun working environment. Now, naturally, Atlassians ask a lot of the experienced team, so they need a place to keep all those requests. And as you can imagine, they use Jira to track those requests. So this is a screenshot of one of our internal Jira instances with the Office project. And you can see that staff are raising issues that range from things like I need a chair to the light above me is flickering and I can't do my work. When you look at what's inside one of these issues, aside from a customized issue type, everything else is just the Jira core field. So you've got the main thing, which is the summary, the description, and who reported the issue. And you're just using, you can just use Jira's quick create form to raise those issues. Now, in terms of how the issues move around once they've been created, it's a really simple workflow. You create tasks, someone works on those tasks, and then the tasks get resolved. Now, this is a pattern that I identify as task management, and it's not just applicable to office administration. It's any kind of project where you have these tasks and you're moving them through a really simple, get things done kind of workflow. So the tips that you see that apply in this scenario could be applied to any of these type of scenarios that follow the same pattern. So if we think about how to implement this as a Jira project, it's basically about using the Jira defaults, get a new project started, and refine the configuration over time. And if you've got multiple task management processes, all you need to do is just create one configuration scheme and unify those projects using that one scheme. It saves on effort for you as administrators because you just have to define the configuration once. And then if we look at how issues get used once you've created that project, so we have a couple of different ways that you could get your office administration team to use these issues. We have the Jira dashboard with its gadgets. So things like the Assign to Me gadget can allow the team to just have one page open and they can see what tasks they need to work on at any given time. You've also got things like email subscriptions, either when issues get updated or through a filter subscription. And they can monitor their mail client if they so wish to see when new issues get created or updated. And then we have things like other apps that allow you to consume Jira issues. So you've got, it was mentioned, I think yesterday or today, the Jira Real Life app, which is a smartphone app that allows you to raise issues from a phone just by taking a picture and writing a description. So using ideas like this, it's really easy to put the power of creating tasks in your users' hands, and they didn't even need to know about Jira as a web application. So the main takeaway from this scenario is to start small with Jira defaults and go from there. Kim Peppers, who's actually in the audience today, she spoke at the Summit last year, and she's a system administrator at VeriSign. And she said something that really resonates with this scenario is to start small, simplify, and get your team into the tool. Just get them to start using it. And once they're there, they're going to see how things work, and they're going to really enjoy actually having something to follow the process in. So scenario 1, we talked about task management. Let's go to scenario 2. We're going to talk about feedback. And this is about getting your customers to have a conversation with you. So now, Atlassian have a lot of customers, all of you, and each of those customers have opinions about the products that they use. So creating a channel for those customers to give feedback gives our product teams a great insight into how people are experiencing our products, what works well and what doesn't. Again, we use Jira to track our feedback requests. So you can see here some screenshot of Greenhopper feedback issues. And these are real life examples of green offer feedback that people have given us as we've been developing our new rapid boards. What's really cool to note is that in this sense, feedback is not just limited to external customers such as yourselves. We actually have internal customers dog fooding Greenhopper and giving us that feedback in a really rapid fire kind of way. And actually the split is about 70-30, I think. So we actually have majority customers giving us feedback, but also internal customers. And this gives us a broad view of how we're going with our product. Now, we've got multiple mechanisms in Atlassian for capturing that feedback. As you're probably aware, we have the public Jira instance, jira.atlassian.com, and we encourage all of our customers to raise issues there, bug reports, improvement requests, whenever they find something with our products that they want to improve. However, we also have this other mechanism for feedback. And as you can see, it's actually a lot easier and yields a lot more feedback than just creating Jira issues by hand. Now, the pattern that's in this scenario is one of client feedback. So we're talking about capturing feedback from our clients or our users, and we want that feedback capturing process to be simple. And we want to also be able to start a conversation. So you want to get their details, and if they provide you with some insightful information, we want to use that as a launchpad to do more things. But this isn't just about software. You could have a feedback process around, for example, if your HR department roll out a new staff policy and they want to get feedback on how that policy is going amongst their staff. Now, you don't want your staff to raise a Jira issue just because they have an opinion about HR policy. You want them to just be able to fire and forget. Now, if we think about how to implement this kind of thing in a Jira project, we could think about maybe having our clients sending emails to a mailbox and using Jira mail handlers to create those issues. But I think that's a lot of effort because it requires people to go outside of the context of what they're doing, go to their mail app and send us an email to a specific mail address. They also have to, we don't get the chance to capture the data we want in a structured way. And if we also want to provide our users with the option to do anonymous feedback, we can't do that because email will always be traceable back to that person. But the bottom line is we want to make it as easy as possible. So if we think about using the issue collector, which you probably saw in this morning's keynote, it's a really powerful way for you as administrators to create a form that's embeddable in any web application. So most of you probably run a Confluence or other intranet application that is your internal communication tool. You can embed the Jira issue collector with just a single line of JavaScript, and that pops up a form that you see here, or any data that you want to capture in that form. And basically that gives you the ability to get your users to write in whatever feedback they need, and it goes and creates a Jira issue in the backend. So you can then triage that feedback and optionally start that conversation. So I'm not going to talk about that at great length because Andreas, who's the author of the Jira issue collector, is going to be giving a talk later today. So I highly recommend you go check out that talk. That's going to give you a lot of good ideas on how to get good feedback. But the bottom line is try to use the Jira issue collector to start a conversation with your customers. All right, so scenario 2, we saw the client feedback pattern. Let's talk about communications. All right. So I bet that most communications teams in the world use something like this to manage their work, an email client. Now, at Atlassian, we don't do this. And I thought for this scenario, I actually would talk about a real-world team who's not using Jira yet, but does do this, and how we could possibly bring them into Jira. And how I know about this team is it's actually the team that my girlfriend works in, and she's here today. So she works in a large government organization in the communications team. And every time she comes home and tells me about how inefficient their process is, all I can think is, wouldn't this be so much better if you were using Jira? So let's step through this scenario and see if we can get them into Jira. So one of the processes that they have to follow in their work is media inquiries. So they're a large government organization. They have journalists coming to them and asking them about current issues. So what happens is a journalist sends an email inquiry to a shared mailbox that goes to the whole team. Then someone from that team has to grab that work and they say, okay, I'm going to take this work, and they have to communicate that back to the team. They go away and work on it. Now, the inquiry is usually about a specific area in the organization, so they have to go seek out the expert in that area, and they have to collaborate with that person on drafting this formal response. Then once they've done that, they have to go to the executive manager and get approval on this formal statement. Once they've gone back and forth on that a few times, they then go back and respond to the journalist with the formal statement, and they have to copy in the entire communications team so that the team knows that the work got done. And then at the end of every week, the team meets with the senior management and go through all the media inquiries that came in and went out of that team in the week. And they do this by trawling the mailbox. Now, you don't need me to tell you that this process is fraught with problems, and I'm confident that Jira could solve all of these. So the pattern that I'm seeing here is one of shared responsibilities. You've got a whole team who all need to do the same kind of tasks, but also you want that team to have visibility of those tasks. So you want the team to be able to know what the status is of a task at any given time. So if we think about how to implement that as a Jira project, we have to think about three things. We've got to think about the workflow, we've got to think about how to create issues, and we've got to think about rapid boards. So with the workflow, I'm sure a lot of you have configured many custom workflows in your time already. But what I like to do when thinking about a new workflow, particularly in non-software cases, think about the what and the when. What information is required in the workflow, and at what points in time do you need those information? You also probably want to think about issue types, because that can branch the workflow in different ways. So if we think about the media inquiry process that we saw before, what I would do is first figure out the people involved in the process. So map out everyone who's involved in this business process. Then you want to look at how the interactions work between those people. So you can see here, these interactions are the ones that I mentioned before, and we're formalizing that. So the comms officer at the bottom, they actually are involved in a lot of different interactions with a lot of different people. They're the owner of the task. So what you usually need with the workflow setup around this process is a workflow step for each person that's involved in the process. And then the interactions between those people form your transitions, your workflow transitions. And that gives you a pretty good first go at a map of a workflow that you can put in Jira today. Now, obviously this workflow is inefficient, but the simple act of putting this on paper and mapping out this workflow highlights those inefficiencies and allows you to improve that process, not just in the Jira project, but back in the real world as well. So, for example, we know that the comms officer is the owner of the tasks, and they don't actually assign that task back to experts and back to the executive manager. They always hold on to it, but they get feedback from them. So rather than having extra workflow steps, we could actually just streamline that and have one assigned step, and then the seeking advice step goes on from there. And you can collaborate using the @mention stuff that Scott mentioned this morning, and using watches and things like that. Now, if you think about how to create those issues for this process, generally, when you see that external parties are the result, are the reason that requests are being created, you want to think about setting up mail handlers, because particularly in a communications kind of world where you've got people very used to email communication, it's already a familiar way for them to communicate with you, and it doesn't require that user to know anything about your internal process. And it means you have to train less people in the Jira system. So I'm sure you've set up mail handlers in Jira before, but if you haven't, we've got great documentation around that, and there's also third-party plugins that allow you to customize that even further and take it on a larger scale. Now, rapid boards I mentioned before. This is something in Greenhopper, and as I am a Greenhopper developer, it's no surprise that I'm pimping this out. But I really believe that in processes like these, where you have your shared responsibilities, it really makes sense to have your tasks visualized on a rapid board. So what we can see here is an example of what this communications team's rapid board would look like. And you can see here that we've got tasks representing each task that cards representing each task that the team has to do. So on those cards, you get a really great high-level vision of what that task is about. You've got the issue type, the priority, the summary, and who's working on it. You don't need to go into Jira to figure out what this task is about. You've also got a great visual representation of your workflow. So each column here denotes a step in the process, and it's very easy to see from someone who's totally outside of that process what the workflow is. We move from left to right, and it's very easy to know where things are at any given time. And when you're doing those tasks, the Rapid Board gives you a very easy to use drag and drop interface. So as you're working on a task, just drag it to the next column and it's done. So Greenhopper Rapid Boards are typically used by agile software teams, but this doesn't have to be the case. It can be used for anyone who's interested in making their processes lean. For those reasons mentioned, it just really allows you to identify how to speed up your work processes. And they make great information radiators. So Scott mentioned in this morning's keynote how you can have your Rapid Boards as a wall board. If you set up one of those Rapid Boards on a television screen in your team area, or even if you have teams located across different offices, you can instantly see, anyone who walks past knows what the status of your team's work is. So if you want to know more about Greenhopper Rapid Boards, we've got a few Scrum and Kanban lightning talks this afternoon where we actually have Greenhopper developers talking about how Greenhopper is used internally in Atlassian. So I recommend you check that out. And we've also got the State of the Union talk this afternoon too. But the main summary here is tracking your processes in Greenhopper Rapid Boards and Jira workflows gives you instant clarity and accountability on those processes. So we've seen 3 patterns now. Let's go through the last scenario. I'm going to talk about recruitment. So if you want great stuff in your company, you need a great recruitment process. And Atlassian's HR department, who we call the talent team, drive their recruitment process, but they also get the input of developers because we are a tech company. We need to know, how people are with other developers. So in the first 7 years of Atlassian's existence, we used Jira to track this recruitment process. And it was a fantastic tool for this kind of thing because Jira is, as you know, ultimately flexible, especially with permissions. So making sure that people who don't need to know about recruitment applications can't see those applications. And due to the extensibility and the platform options in Jira, we could do things like build these recruitment dashboards that allow recruitment team, who are a totally non-technical team, visualize their information. However, Atlassian got too big. And as we started to get in surplus of 50, 100 applications a week, we started looking for an enterprise solution in recruitment to do all the niche recruitment features that Jira didn't do out of the box. But the really interesting thing about this is that Jira doesn't have to be your forever tool. A lot of systems, you start using them and then you get locked into the system. You can't get your data out again. Jira makes a fantastic springboard to prototype something like a recruitment process or any other business process and get that going as a formalized solution. And then if and when you do grow out of it, you can get your data out of it. You can export the data as XML, you can use CSV or any other format. You can even use the REST APIs and build other applications on top of it. But that data is going to be there and it's going to be structured. It's going to be in the format that you want it. But don't worry, the talent team still use Jira today. It's just that they use it in other processes. So this is a chart of all the information systems that our recruitment team uses at Atlassian. And you can see that Jira is still heavily involved in the integration with those systems. But let's talk about how we did use Jira and how we did put that process into Jira. So we have a process where our talent team manages those applications. They create the applications by hand. They move them through the workflow. But we also have these developers. And they comment on issues and also provide specific structured feedback on those applications. But we want no one else in the company to see those issues. We also have an extra requirement where you've got an applicant becomes hired, and that creates more work, not just for the talent team, but also for the experience team. So you've hired someone from across the world, you've got to relocate them. That's a formal process that requires more work. You've also got to get them set up in the office. So you've got to get them chocolate, you've got to get them a desk, chairs, make sure their light's working, all that kind of stuff. So we've got other connected processes to this process. So the two patterns that I see in this example are one of a lockdown project, where you only show people information on a need-to-know basis. And then you've also got the connected processes pattern. So the points at which those business processes connect often requires manual, tedious work. And you want to automate that work where possible to make the lives of your staff a lot easier. So if we think about how to implement that as a Jira project, we've got two things to consider. We've got security and how to connect those projects. So with security, I'm sure you're aware you've got permission schemes. Now, you only want your issues to be visible to the talent team, so that's fine. We can restrict the browse permission on the issues to that team. We also want interviewers to see them. So again, we can add those interviewers into that scheme. But we don't want them to edit the issues. We only want them to view them and provide specific feedback at specific points in the workflow. So how we implement this is implementing a multi-user custom field that tracks those interviewers for that particular application. And then you can assign that custom field to those specific permissions in your scheme, and that allows them to browse those issues when they need to. But we still haven't solved the edit case. So how do we figure that out? We use workflow transitions that loop back onto themselves to provide that user, those developers with a mechanism to give that feedback. So what we have is an example of a view of an application from the perspective of a developer. And you can see here that they don't have the edit permission, but they do have the comment permission, which is good because we want them to provide free-form feedback as well and have a conversation with our talent team. But they also have the ability to do this phone screen feedback transition. And what that does is it pops the transition dialog, and we've set that up so that screen has the specific fields that we want to capture in this part of the process. So the phone screen is one step in the many steps of the recruitment process, and we have specific requirements on what knowledge to capture there. So using these loopback transitions, we actually have a way for developers to know exactly what's required of them when they're answering, when they're providing feedback. And given that it's in a transition, it doesn't actually count as an issue edit. So we got away with the fact that we didn't give them edit permission, but they're still modifying the issue. Now, to connect the projects up, we want to, when the workflow hits the hired step, so the candidates accepted the proposal, the job, we want to make that extra work, and we want to try to automate that if possible. So we have some approaches that we could use. We could have an external tool outside of Jira that polls Jira periodically for those applications and creates those issues using the REST API or Java APIs. We could also write issue listener plugins or workflow post functions to do the same thing, and that sits inside Jira and runs inside Jira. So if we think about the external tool, that could be a good option if we want to interface with a lot of external systems at that time where we need to create that extra issue or those extra issues. Because, for example, we might have an application that stores all our staff information, and we want to poll that to get the information to put into the Jira issues. But if you're thinking about just staying internal to Jira, there's a plugin called the Script Runner plugin, which is available on the plugins.atlassian.com. And what this actually does is allow you to write in GroovyScript or another scripting language of your choice, issue listeners or workflow post functions without actually coding and deploying a full plugin. All you need to do is write a script, configure it, test it out, and away you go. This is a really fast way to customize your workflows and also to provide extra issue events. And the great thing about the plugin is it has built-in examples on how to do this. So what we would do with this plugin is create a linked issue from that recruitment issue in the Office project, for example. And there's actually an example on how to do that on the Script Runner website. And on my slide resources page, I also provide you with an example of that in a workflow. So to summarize that scenario, you want to use Jira to automate the tedious manual work that connects your multiple business processes. So we've come to the end of the scenarios, and we've seen quite a few different patterns, and I hope that you can see where they are in your business processes already. Now we want to talk about how to make sure you succeed on this kind of journey. The first thing you want to do is find your Jira Champion. Find the person in your organization or in the team that you're trying to help out that you can really sell the idea of Jira to. And that person becomes your Jira advocate, becomes your go-to person, the one person you interface with that you can bounce ideas off and help them improve Jira. And if you find a few people, that's even better. You can start a working group, get things organized, and take it to the whole organization as a group. You also want to educate and excite your users. So without a good education step, you know as admins that you can't get people to adopt a new system. So you really want to make that as simple as possible. Try to put it into their employee induction. Have a wiki page where you have like a one-page thing on how to use Jira for this process. You can even if you have the plugin developer capacity, you can try to build apps on top of Jira to simplify that interface as well. At Atlassian, we offer a couple of different resources that you may not be aware about that help you train your users in Jira. So we have the Atlassian University, which is more a global, every user, this is the basics in Jira kind of resource. And you can buy licenses for that from Atlassian at a very low cost. We also have the quickstart.atlassian.com resource, which is more for what we call Jira Ninjas. And it provides admins such as yourselves and power users with the tips that they need to use Jira more extensively. And then when you're exciting your users, try to engage them frequently, get their feedback about how you're going with mapping these processes in Jira. Don't just set it up once and forget about it. Try to regularly ask them, hey, what can we do that makes this better? And show off your progress as well. You're going to have great wins with this kind of initiative. So don't be afraid to actually get people in a room and show them this is what we did, how we improved this process with Jira. You've also got to know what issues can be to be successful. So Jira is essentially an issue database, and there is an inherent hierarchy in that database, how entities relate to each other. So you know that you've got projects and you've got issues underneath those projects. And you also have components as well that you can assign to issues, and you've got the same with versions and labels and things like that. So when you're thinking about your business processes, think about how that fits into the Jira hierarchy, how you can map the entities that are specific to your business process into Jira entities. So for example, if we're thinking about a help desk scenario, you've got three main entities that you're probably thinking about. You've got products, tickets, and customers. And you need to map that into your Jira project somehow, so into the Jira system somehow. So with products, it's pretty simple. You probably want to map them as projects because you probably have different field configurations for each product. You might have different workflows. It makes good sense to set that up as a project. That makes the tickets a natural fit for issues because issues live underneath one product. But then when you're thinking about customers, how do you map the customers into this entity hierarchy? You can't make them components because while components allow you to assign the same thing to multiple issues and report on that, you can't store a lot of metadata against components. You've got really limited amount of information there. You could also try using separate issues as to map your customers, but unfortunately that's a little bit janky as well because issues kind of move through a workflow and customers don't really move through a workflow. And then you also have to employ Jira's issue linking mechanism to associate those customers to those tickets. So what we do at Atlassian with our help desk site, support.atlassian.com, is we've actually mapped the customers to the user entities in Jira. Now this doesn't get you the ability to enter a lot of metadata against the customers because, again, against users in Jira, you can only enter a certain amount of things. So what we do is we employ a separate system, Scout, which we call Scout, and we actually store all of our customer information there, like the licenses that they've purchased and things like that. So I know I'm running short on time, so I'm going to breeze through this section. Now you've been successful, how do you stay that way? One of the main things that we hear from our experts when we talk to them about how they deal with our customers is that the process to creating and configuring Jira projects isn't the best. And we know this and we're fixing it. But just keep it in mind as administrators, usually you're aiming for the end goal of workflows, but you actually have to define all these other entities in Jira before you can get to that step. So if you keep this ordering in mind when you're defining your projects, you'll have a much smoother configuration step. You also want to separate out your Jira instances. So this allows you to separate your core business, which may have different SLAs, to your internal business, which is more just about getting your business teams into Jira. So we have at Atlassian a public Jira instance, jira.atlassian.com, which is for our core business, which is software bugs, software tracking, software tracking, project tracking. But we actually have several internal instances that our business teams use, and we've configured those differently with different plugins so that we can actually customize the processes to their needs. When you're thinking about how to gather the requirements from your internal customers, try to keep it simple. Ask yourself, is their process really that special, or can I just use an existing pattern that we've already done in Jira before? Try to reuse the same configurations as much as possible, and that may even help them realize that their processes are actually overcomplicated. If you do need to design custom processes around custom Jira projects, think about employing standardized questionnaires. This is what a lot of our experts do. They have a standard list of questions that they ask their customers, and those questions map specific things about configuring the Jira instance. So that makes your job easier because you have a standard set of questions, and that also helps your customers vocalize what their needs are. Just some things to avoid. If you're setting up a lot of workflows, a lot of statuses, a lot of custom fields, you're going to end up, if you're not careful, with things like this, where you have a list of statuses and you have no idea what status belongs to what project or what process. So a simple thing you can do with statuses and things like this is just apply a prefix code that relates to that pattern or that project. And Kim Peppers, who I mentioned before, she actually highlighted a lot of these good tips in her Summit talk last year, growing Jira from the grassroots to the enterprise. So really go check out that talk online to get some more ideas around that. And also, make sure you check out Jonathan Doklovic's talk today on workflow magic. He's going to give you a fantastic way to share workflows between Jira instances. And actually, all the slide resources that I've prepared, all the workflows that I've talked about, all those custom processes are actually downloadable today on plugins.atlassian.com as workflow bundles that you can install into your Jira instance using this plugin. So no more do you need to actually go and recreate workflows by hand. You can actually export them as a bundle with the plugins required as necessary and put them onto new instances. So we've come to the end of the journey. I hope you've learned a lot today about seeing process patterns and getting the most out of Jira. Can I have a quick show of hands who already thinks that they were a workflow hunter before today's talk? All right, so some of you. And now, who thinks that they could be a workflow hunter knowing these tips? Okay, that's more. That's good. All right. So what I want you to do is to get onto this link, share your experiences with us, how you approached the problem of putting your business processes into Jira. It's just a Confluence page, so just feel free to add comments and have a discussion with your fellow admins about how you did this and what worked and what didn't. And I'll be listening, and so will the Jira team, and we can hopefully make this easier in the future. So I know we're running on lunch, but if anyone has one or two questions.